Good morning and happy Juneteenth. Sometimes the news of freedom and equality takes a little time to get there and can arrive late, or perhaps sometimes the announcement came too soon. It's hard to tell. I am delighted to be in your neighborhood this morning. And did you know that Palatka is more urban than my fairly hip Riverside neighborhood in Jacksonville? Did you know that? I went looking for some background statistics on the red and the blue locally, and I found that mid-Palatka, north of Reed Street, I think it was, held Trump under 20%. Whereas my little hip part of Jacksonville, we were only about 10% above the national average for Biden. On the other hand, I believe that if we count all souls of Putnam County, it looks like there's about a 3-2 advantage in Republican voter registration. And to the southeast and northwest of Palatka, where the tractors run a little harder, there's some really deep red. Trump ran at or near 90% once we got out there. So I'm not coming here to talk to you about politics today. I've done this topic 3 times in partisan context when I was invited to after it began from an observation in a sermon here about 14 months ago. Instead, what I want to do is I want to come back to the pulpit and address things from the standpoint of the resources of our religion for how to rise above politics, if you will. The documentarian that was called to testify before the committee, I think this was at the first hearing, said that the documentary they were working on was on the topic of why are Americans so divided when we have so much in common, right? And so one of the things that I found when I was changing up a sermon I did about 14 months ago to pull out something that was the most important to me in each of our principles, in that 5th principle, it just seemed to me that there's a real tension between conscience and the democratic process, because conscience is really saying this is a direct claim to moral truth, no matter how many people deny that it's true. When abolitionists were saying slavery is wrong, they didn't have to squint and check statistics. They knew it. Religious people believe conscience is the voice of God within us, but you don't have to be religious to believe powerfully in the acts of conscience, the claims of conscience, or the importance of conscientious action. This morning, for me, a really compelling example of conscience is the Black Lives Matter movement. Even our national conscience, because for me, that movement embodies our most sacred American ideals of the democratic point, not just the process, of all being created equal. And so when I read arguments about things and people want to talk around one thing and another, I'm like, are you an idiot? What's this Madison stuff if for this whole length of our history people have not been treated equally? Don't give me Madison. Once we address this, then we can go talk political philosophy. But for now, anyway, I'm not going to be political today, of course. And as you well know, All Souls Unitarian Universalist of Putnam County is not in any way affiliated with any political party, movement, or otherwise registered thing. So if I happen to slip and say something that sounds political, chalk it up to the freedom of the pulpit. One of the things that we find in Republican America is that those ideals extended to the realities of our present society are taken to be radical. Whites are castigated for wokeness when we are too sympathetic. Teaching history that's factual about race is against the law. Maybe you even get some of that in your neighborhoods. But the more you feel like an outlier in these red counties around us, the more crucial it is that this congregation of liberal religion, in the inclusive sense of liberal, is here. For what we bring to each other, and we hope for what collectively we can bring to our world, as the covenant says. So that's what I want to speak to today. I want to speak to democracy in a Republican neighborhood in the same way I would say liberal religion in a somewhat illiberal county. But that's not to say that I want to address national politics. I want to bring it down to the local level, because I'm not in any way going to encourage you to think nice thoughts about people whose last names are Trump, McConnell, McCarthy, or Carlson. Go ahead and vilify them all. But your neighbors. This is move number one, okay? Put a curtain up between all the political leaders who've read lots of books and know better and have all these opportunities and have their hands on the megaphone. Put a curtain up between them and whoever you're seeing in your neighborhood, whoever in your family you can't go to dinner with anymore because of the conversations that happen or whatever. Because what I want to say is, the people who follow positions and people that I feel are almost, not just almost, I'll drop that, criminally responsible for the loss of lives and potentially threatening our democracy. Our neighbors are not people who have always believed that stuff. They're not people who live and die by that stuff. Most of them now are not people who so deeply believe it that they couldn't change within a few weeks, depending on what they saw in the world around them. It may be that there are things that they believe that are real different from what you believe, but that could be okay. What I want to suggest is take the worst things they seem to be believing and put a curtain up and say, well, they weren't always like that. Something's going on here. The next thing I want you to do, besides setting that aside, is I want you to think for a few minutes about how we all work, how we all tick. We're going to look at a little bit of psychology. Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, is a positive psychologist who specializes in moral psychology and in the psychology of politics. He wrote a really fascinating book called The Righteous Mind. And between his prior book, The Happiness Hypothesis, and that book, there's some really interesting things come out. He likens our minds to a rider on an elephant. And he talks about the different layers evolution from an evolutionary standpoint that are in our brain and the way we think about the world, the way we come to the world. And the bottom line is, our fundamental attitudes about politics and about morality are not based on rational decisions that we've made. We don't first think it through and then come to a conclusion, and that becomes what we're strongly committed to. Have you ever had a dream that something was happening and that led to this and this led to that, and the last thing that was the series of events in that was a bell ringing and you realized your alarm was going off? Have you ever had anything like that? I read a fascinating account, I think by Daniel Dennett many years ago, it might have been in Brainstorms, that what the dream does is it takes the event and slaps a story on in very quick time, so that the dream story matches what the stimulus was, but in the story, the stimulus to the thing comes last. That's how we reason about morality. Our brain does these things so fast and instinctively and reactively that then we slap something on. I won't go into the details of the experiments except for one point I'll bring in later. But that's very important. When you're arguing with somebody, you're not going to convince them that their reasoning is wrong. Or if you do, you're not going to change their mind. Because the reasoning came after they'd already made their minds up. And guess what? You did too, if you're like me. In fact, one of the things we find is that we also can't look at things in terms of people's political ideology and think we're going to understand what's making us tick. You know how pollsters will ask these questions, and then they'll take these questions, and each of your answers will set up a correlation so that they could characterize you without having to ask directly. Do you hold positions that are very liberal, somewhat liberal, moderate, somewhat conservative, very conservative, or completely out of your mind? So what they found in statistics, a correlation of 100% means they're the same all the time. 0% would mean they're always different, so chance would be something fairly low. The correlation that they found between what you really are on that political spectrum and what you say you are is 0.25. If there were 4 choices and you had a correlation of 0.25, that's chance, okay? So if I say, well, I'm a conservative, there's a 25% chance that my answers to questions will line up that way. If I say I'm right? You get the idea? So take those two things together. When you're disagreeing with somebody at a fundamental level about all this stuff to the point where it's like the biggest difference in the world, and you're certainly not going to let your child marry one of them, right? Those are not matters of reason, and they're not matters of ideology. However, Haidt estimates that between 1/3 and 1/2 of our disposition to these different ways of reacting to the world is genetically given to us. Now, given doesn't mean absolutely fixed and deterministic or epigenetics and stuff, but we're leaning a certain way. So if what's going on in your brain is characterized by a certain balance of glutamate and serotonin levels, then you may just feel a lot more fearful of threats in the world, and you may find yourself voting Republican. If, on the other hand, your brain gets a really nice dopamine kick like mine does, when you start thinking about a world that's out there to be explored and all the growth and experience we can have in that, you may well be leaning towards a liberal. So that's a big chunk of what's there to begin with. Yes, who we hang out with and the experiences. Yes, what news stations we watch and that kind of thing. Yes, the cultural sorting that has gone on increasingly over this period of greatest division in our history. But what I want to do at the really down-to-earth level of the neighborhood is I want us to think as if we put too much importance on the content of our beliefs. We are, we say, a non-creedal religion. And so in a way, what I'm saying here is, when it comes to morality and when it comes to politics, what we would call creed is not driving that elephant. And I think if we understand that, it's possible that we can have more empathy for people who are kind of reacting to what their brains are accustomed to doing. We could maybe, I don't know, I'll leave that to you. But I do want to say that anyone who values truth should stop worshiping reason. What happens, says Haidt, is at the individual level. I believe I'm acting in my self-interest. I believe I'm one of these people economists talks about that just knows all the things I need to know and makes rational decisions. And nobody's like that. But if I am a Republican running for re-election in Wyoming, I don't do what Liz Cheney is doing, right? And if I am a Democrat running for re-election in a liberal district in California or New York, I don't do what Joe Manchin is doing. So our political system is set up to polarize and separate so that the people who get through the primaries on this side and the people who get through, at least in aggregate, he says that's the way our whole society works. What we have is a lot of individuals who are completely functional in their thinking in terms of evolutionary adaptation. You're doing the things that'll get you along in your society. But collectively, it's a complete dysfunction. So how do we deal with that? One of the things I want to suggest is that comes out of that psychology stuff is, if you have a group an institution, a purpose, and you want to get to the truth, you better have people with different points of view and different ideologies. Because if you all think the same, you're all going to be carrying the same bias and you're not going to get beyond that. So the diversity of the group is critical. Now apply that to a democracy. I don't want to say we need Proud Boys in the democratic conversation, but we need conservatives and liberals. We need people who say fundamental change is needed and different kinds of change at that. So if I say that, then even if I don't respect ex-presidents who want to just turn over the whole table, let's say, I have to respect that attitude that puts more emphasis on fear and threat is an important part of the balance in our society. Just as that cool dopamine kick kind of, whoa, we could do that, let's put on a play, is an important part of our society too. We have to have that balance. So, where do we go to even try to move in that direction? If it's not ideology and it's not argument, how can I understand this deeper thing, this feeling sort of thing that reminds me of a Van Morrison title, The Inarticulate Speech of the Heart? How do I get at that? In Carlos Lozado's really interesting book called What Were We Thinking? A Brief History of the Trump Era. One of the books that he refers to is called Strangers in Their Own Land. And that author is looking at Southerners who support Trump and she says, what I discovered was the profound importance of emotional self-interest. Not self-interest about my economic outcomes, but how am I going to feel about myself and my world? And so there are different ways that researchers and thinkers and writers and pundits have come at this thing. Another one observed that when someone is coming from a life of privilege, as I have come from, and is confronted by the challenge of equality, that can feel like reverse discrimination. It can even feel like oppression. And so you have a whole lot of white people who say, well, now the tables have turned, and now it's white people who are being discriminated against in the name of affirmative action. There are a lot of people who believe that. To put it in a less dramatic way, 92% of white police officers that were surveyed agreed with the statement that we have now reached a point in this nation where blacks have equal opportunity to whites. 92% of police officers. Never mind that average family income for a black family is approximately 1/10 of what it is for a white family. But you get the idea. If somebody's thinking that way, if what it feels like is I'm the one being oppressed, several of these authors have suggested we have to respect that. We have to work with that. We have to, if not agree with it in any sense, which I would never advise, to at least make some effort to take that into account if we're going to talk to people who are coming from that place. But to even begin to do so, I would suggest we need to loosen the grip of righteousness. If I believe that I have the complete moral truth about the issues that are dividing our country, and I believe that nobody can have anything else to say that would have any merit, why talk to anybody? What's the point of anything? I'm not going to be a very pleasant conversationalist, except people who agree with me. Boy, we get on great. I am more drawn to the position of the author of another book he reviewed called Radical Hope. And she said, in the form of a letter to a young child, I have a distrust of certitude, even when I agree with the substance of what is being said. I worry that you will grow up in a time of ideological haste, a time of wild conviction and coarsened thought. And that sounds like something a neoconservative would say. That we need to be philosophical, that we need to advance the ends of dispassionate reason. And yet, I 100% agree with that, bringing my philosophy background in a time when the heat of the argument seems not to get us too far indeed. We have a lot in common with our neighbors, and we have life in common with our neighbors. We have medical bills, or we have medical ailments, or we have grandchildren or grandfathers or mothers. We have people in need. We have jealous coworkers. We have all kinds of things that they may have too. Underneath all that distinguishes us, part of our faith, stemming from that very first principle of intrinsic dignity and worth, is that we're all in this boat together, right? And we have to start from there, I say. So here's a method that I use to try to cultivate some empathy for people I couldn't begin to agree with and don't intellectually respect in the slightest when I put it on that level. I'm serious. I don't mean any disrespect at the level of the soul, but at the level of the intellect, my God. Really? Antifa was that? That was Antifa? Just trying to make Trump look bad? Okay. I'm sorry. That was just one example. So here's what I do. My brother is a huge Trump supporter. I'm 6 years older than he is. I've known him all my life. He is a person of impeccable character. He's quirky like I am in his own way, as most of us are, I think. Some of us hide it better. But he has a very strong moral character. He had a motorcycle accident, car accident, all kinds of things, and he worked 2 jobs to pay off doctor's bills that he could have gotten out from under just by the fact that he couldn't afford to pay them for any number of years, and it was a lot of money, and they could have written a piece of it off. But no, it was important to him as a point of honor to pay that bill to the last penny himself. Do you know anybody who's got that kind of ethics? That is a more traditionally rigid kind of an ethical code. But I think somebody whose ethics run that way is not in the least bit less ethical because of it. It's how they work. And my brother is certainly not an unethical person. So what I do for this exercise is I start with, what if there's somebody like my brother who believes pretty much the opposite of the things that I'm believing about what I take to be the most important divisions in America today? How am I going to have empathy for that? How am I going to respect that? And I used to build it out in terms of reasons. But after reading these things, I'm not going to build it out in terms of reasons. I'm going to build it out this morning by briefly trying to get at what the feeling is behind that. And the feeling behind that is that deeper than a particular policy or who gets elected in a particular year or whether something's red or blue, deeper than that is a way of life. And I'm just going to speak now as if I am a version of my brother, okay? The American way of life that I have grown up with is characterized by values that are fading away from us, that fewer and fewer people seem to live by. And if I had a grandchild, as I do, as Mark, I wouldn't want her to be growing up in this world where maybe she'll get teased at school just because she believes in Jesus. Or maybe she'll hold the door for someone and they'll say, oh, no, I'm the wrong kind of gender for you to do that to. How could you be so disrespectful? When the person meant well. So whatever examples might follow from that, my sense of it is that underneath everything, we rely on the sense of a way of life, that's deeper than the forms of our manners and our culture and our writings and our beliefs. Deeper than that is the sense of way of life. We live in it differently. We interpret it differently. We articulate it differently, and some much less than others. But part of that I think some people feel is being pulled out from under them is an acceptance of the centrality of faith in our lives. I think there are a lot of people who are tired of hearing that if you believe in God, you're stupid. And I think there are a lot of people who are tired of being talked down to because they don't belong to the same intellectual elite that they perceive those people coming from. I think that there are people who look around and see people who are neighbors of theirs that they think are just trying to get something for free. Don't take a free ride from no one, like that. I love that video. Kills me, man. I didn't know I could come up here and talk after it, because what it does is it puts into a southern accent with those Oprah global images of humanity exactly what I'm talking about. That is nothing to make fun of. And so what I would do if I were trying to have an empathy for a character like my brother's is I might just construct a kind of dialogue where the first step would be that I have to develop some empathy for my own brother, who I love and have known all my life. If in the real world I were talking to a neighbor who was like that, I wouldn't begin from morality or politics. My granddaughter's birthday is Juneteenth, but we celebrated with a party yesterday, and I was like the guy in the water stuff. And I was a couple hours. I'm out there playing with the kids in the water while all the other parents are sitting around, oh, good job, Mark. I had a ball. If I'm playing with kids and somebody with a MAGA hat that they happen to forget and leave at home is out there playing with kids, we're both a couple of pop-pops just having a ball. We got a lot in common. We're not political, we're not religious, we're just a couple of people living life, doing the things that you do and enjoying it. Those are the places we meet people. Those are the places we proceed from. If I get to know someone a little bit, if there are points of trust and commonality, I'm going to go to a second empathy move. Let's say this happens. God, I hate it. You say, oh, I'm not going to bring up politics with them, and then they make some comment, right? Let's suppose that it wasn't an out-and-out racist comment that I just had to address directly, because I have to when that happens. Let's suppose it was some Biden crack or something like that. One of the things that I'm trying to work out is a way to use a line that goes something like this. If I can turn things toward, our society, we really are having problems in our society today, aren't we? Here's my line. If I got on this page or the next one? No, it's the next page. Yeah, here it is. Wet my whistle for this one. This is where my consulting fee comes in. Work on this one. Try this pickup line. I just wish all our kids had what they need to grow into good Americans. I just wish all our kids had what they need to grow into good Americans. So if you see your neighbors not taking the right care of their kids, if you see people who are acting a certain way and you think, that's not right, I'm going to come back and say, yeah, boy, what would it take for us to bring into that? What would it take? I know some families are having it a lot harder today. Some families just really have it hard today, don't they? And so if a family's really struggling in this way or that way, how do we make sure that, that the kids have medicine, that there's a safe place to leave your baby, that there's universal pre-K, just a few little things that, no big deal, except for that child's life, right? So that's my empathy move, is try to appeal to their sense of American values and say, not just, I wish everybody had economic something, not equal outcomes of wealth. I want every American citizen to be a complete participant in the promise of American ideals. That's what I want. I want every American to feel like they belong, and that when America is great, they can be proud of that. That's what I want. So people will say, well, identity politics, we need to think in terms of America. Yeah, we do. At the same time, If we pretend that there aren't issues that are specific to people who have certain things in common, like the color of their skin, then it's like we're just supposed to go on like everything's fine, like that 90% of white police officers would have us do. So I don't have any answers at the political level. I don't have any answers at the neighborhood level, but I do believe that, as Francis Fukuyama says, identity, quote unquote, politics is absolutely necessary until we have created a world where identity is not as constraining for Americans as it has been and continues to be. And I know I'm going on with a lot of different stuff, and so I'm going to skip over some things, but I want to end with a couple of things. I want to share a quotation from Mr. Smith Goes to Washington on the note of hope. It's not too late, because this country is bigger than the Taylors or you or me or anything else. Great principles don't get lost once they come to light. They're right here. You just have to see them again. I want to close. I was going to say some stuff about religion, but about our religion. But you guys know your religion well enough to. The proof is left for you, as I said in the old algebra books. But I do want to share this. In New York City, in Brooklyn in 1991, there were race riots in Crown Heights when there was a motorcade and one of the cars lagging behind lost control and killed a child. And a mob reacted. I say a mob, I mean it got out of hand. Rabbi Menachem Schneerson, who was the leader of Chabad Lubavitch, was approached by the Jewish Defense League, who had some serious muscle. They said, we'll bring in guns. We can do this. We can defend the whole thing. We will bring in guns. Let us do this. Let us do this, Rebbe. And the rabbi said, no. And they said, well, then what? How do we defend ourselves? What's the defense? Incidentally, the motorcade was for him. And what he said to them when they asked, well, what's our defense? He said, say hello to your neighbor. So I end with that this morning. Thank you.